Hello, everyone. Can you even believe it? It's a Tuesday stream.
Whoa, I was muted. Sorry there.
Yeah, whoa, okay. I could hear myself on the stream. Yeah, Tuesday, the least streamable day, many people say. Uh,
The patch over day from Monday to Wednesday. If you
yeah,
need an emergency inoculation for your Monday spill out, here we are.
yeah. We got Henry face reveal. We got Lux uh, with a new hat. Yeah, a brand new hat. And none of that is super important because the thing we're here to talk about today is people file in. Um, Partially, part of the reason we're gonna get started quickly is that we got to be done in 1 hour sharp because I have other stuff I have to do.
So,
Uh,
what are we here for?
so now that I've wasted time explaining how urgent I am, we're gonna talk about freaking Elden Ring, the goddamn Shadows of the freaking Erdtree.
Yeah, we're here for lore, and hopefully that's why other people are here as well. I understand there's a lot of questions out there pertaining to the lore.
There's a lot of questions in the chat pertaining to how you look versus how you sound, which is funny because to me it makes sense, but I've also known you for so long.
Yeah, you met me in the meat space, so I think you've adapted and
Yeah,
adjusted. I'm curious what's dissonant about it as well, folks. But
yeah.
yeah, spread the word.
Whoever's
Face reveal.
whoever's confused by Henry's appearance versus voice, explain what's so freaking confusing about it because it's normal to me. Um, but we'll get back to that. Shaz the Erdtree came out almost a month ago, which is so cool to me. Um, it was awesome because I guess okay. Here's how I'll put it. When it was coming out, Miyazaki was like, the DLC is about the same size as Limgrave, and that was just not true.
I had heard
it,
vaguely that it was going to be their biggest DLC, and then yeah, I had heard the Limgrave thing.
but it's like it's about the same like dimensions two dimensionally as Limgrave, but like every single like structure is like 9 stories tall.
Yeah, it is 5 Limgraves stacked on top of each other, which is a very fun design choice. I think it's maybe the best map from his designed in a game.
Yeah, I was. That's a good. That's interesting. I guess let's start with that. I don't know if I agree because I think the Elden Ring map, like writ large, is kind of perfect.
See, I do
Uh,
love the Elden Ring map. I think the biggest complaint I would have about it all is it's a large spiral. So there's kind of a large, wide, narrow, linear structure. I think a lot of people get funneled to the capital a bit fast because of it in ways that I don't know, make them hit brick walls. But I mean, I like the way this kind of layered everything on top of each other instead of it being a matter of like, do you go east or west?
yeah, I mean that's interesting, and the way that there's sort of a little bit more built-in narrativity to how you move with the crosses and
Oh
everything.
yeah. There's like narrative story checkpoints in ways from has done before in like Sekiro, but like even in base game Elden Ring, it can be a bit esoteric how some NPCs work. Whereas here, it was like the most coherent the story has ever been told through like NPC summons and meetups and catch ups. I feel.
Henry does look a little bit like Alec Copperman. Sorry, I'm still looking at the chat and vetting the questions. It is true. Um, that was a good. I second that. I mean, not exactly, but I can see where you're coming from with that. Um, okay, so yeah, I think that's true. I mean, Cameron Kunzelman, my favorite video game critic, I think, certainly one of my favorites, described the original Elden Ring as just like a From Software greatest hits album. And I think that's true. And I think it's also true about the DLC is that like it's just the greatest hits extended edition where they like layered in some more Sekiro stuff.
Yeah,
That
I know some people said it was like so big and expansive it could be like Elden Ring 2. I think Elden Ring 1.5 is kind of a better descriptor there as far as it being like a very expansion pack style. Like it condenses what's the best about the game into one overlapping island. Uh, and yeah, they even added in the guard step thing from Sekiro. When you down the first of the Wickermen, you get that sort of guard poise break
yeah.
Ash, or no, it's for the Mimic bottle. But yeah, it adds in the Sekiro mechanics, and it is just like every From game up until then.
They also added punching fighting.
Yeah, the Common Rider
Which,
kicks, that stuff is so cool.
yeah, I only used it a little bit.
Yeah, I do
Full
feel a bit guilty because I used the dual moon spell you get from Rilana, but a lot of the DLC weapons I toyed with, but I didn't really integrate into my final build. But I have more to say about that story wise a bit later on when we're talking more about lore.
yeah, we'll get into that. Chat, while I'm happy to keep answering and correcting your preconceptions about me and Henry, also feel free to add your Elden Ring questions in the chat and we'll try to answer those. Also, Henry doesn't smoke, I smoke. Cigarettes, anyways. Um, so think about that uh when you're making your assumptions about who does what. Because yeah, I smoke enough cigarettes for the both of us, much to my wonderful and brave girlfriend's chagrin. But that aside, yeah. So we can get into floor stuff. So the way I played this game is I watched a friend play it. I used some remote play stuff to jump in on some of my friends' games because I tried really hard to burn through a new Elden Ring character and do it, and then the new Trails game, the 11th installment of the Legend of Heroes Trails series came out, and I could not do both. So that became its own. That's I didn't have a complete. I didn't play it front to back, but I watched through all of it, and I played uh, a lot of a decent chunk of it. You played the whole thing.
Yeah, so I had two pre existing characters from previous Elden Ring runs just kind of sitting at the end of the game. I ran through it with an intelligence build character, so kind of like a magic wizard. I had, the Moonlight Greatsword, the whole Ranny quest stuff. It was like on New Game Plus, so some of the bosses had more HP than on base New Game, but I mean, the difficulty curve was fine for me. Uh, I just kind of binge played it because I didn't get to play it day one. We were doing wrestling and other stuff, and then that week the internet was out, and then when I got it, it was at the end of a few assignments, so I was able to kind of front to back rush through it while talking about it and trading notes with friends over a weekend on like a Discord channel.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, we so that's sort of that's the one part I missed about this that I was upset about because of my obsession with this particular with the Trails games derailing my Elden Ring experience. Is that one thing about Elden Ring in general, and we'll get to Erdtree in a second, that's so cool is the way that it creates these communities of friends who are playing it who leave notes for each other and who tell each other secrets and who work through lore together and tell each other theories. And it creates like a ludic experience that isn't technically multiplayer. I mean, it's multiplayer in that you can do the summons and stuff, but it's not like direct co-op in the way you think about it. But
It's like
it is
MMO
co-op.
light.
Yeah, it's like this weird socialized co-op that is very, very exciting.
I play with a lot of like the multiplayer features on, and like there's lore justifications as to why there's like ghosts roaming the land. And you see messages from other people, but it is interesting when I hear from friends who play offline a lot and they turn it back on. They talk about things feeling like amusement park rides, or like, oh yeah, here's kind of like where everybody kind of queued up the ticketed event before the boss, or before the set piece, or before this
Oh
tricky kind
yeah,
of like navigational part. So yeah, it is interesting how it's like a play at your own pace MMO in that sense.
yeah. It's such a fascinating uh piece of art in so many ways. So I did a little bit of a punching build, and then we respec into using Rilana's dual swords, which were so cool. Uh, running around with those in the Dung Eater armor for most of the game, which was a blast. Loved that. Love and just the whole. Let's just like start. Let's start. So okay, anyone who's watching, spoilers
Yeah,
starting now.
we're
Like
gonna talk about that.
uh we're gonna be talking about theories and philosophy and game design stuff, and we can't talk about that without talking specifically about the things that occur in the game, because you can only investigate a text by engaging with the material of the text, as we all know and respect as sort of critical principle. So we are going to get spoilery. So if you don't want to hear about spoilery things in these games, then go home, but please get someone else to replace you so we
Yeah.
can keep our numbers up for the advertisers.
Also, keep in mind, despite discussing lore and theory and philosophy, a lot of what the game is mechanical and experiential, and like kind of discussing a boss's place in the cosmology does not ruin a lot of the puzzle of fighting them or mastering the
Yeah.
patterns to dance with them.
We'll try not to tell you any special walkthrough tricks. We'll try to avoid that at least. So the basic gist, just to throw out the basic idea of the story of this game, is that Michaela is in the realm of shadows, Michaela, who we last saw as an egg with an arm sticking out of it, sitting on an altar made out of a giant's pelvis. FromSoft is many things, subtle is not one of them. Uh, is in the land of shadows, which is sort of, we learn, where dead people kind of go, and is trying to become a god using rituals and magic and all sorts of. Yeah, please like the stream if you're here. Thank you, Shifting Tides. I appreciate you doing that. I always forget about the mechanical elements of this stuff. Yeah, Michaela's trying to become a god using various rituals. It turns out that many of the things that you did in the first game end up sort of playing out in as parts of Michaela's giant weird scheme to become a god. And all of this is made possible largely by Michaela's ability to like charm and control people. Interestingly, one part of this that I like a lot, I guess, to deviate. So that's like the broad top level narrative. One thing about this that I like quite a lot is that Michaela's goals seem like kind of nice, right? Like that's kind of part of the fun of this narrative, is that Michaela's like brainwashing people and doing these like shunting off parts of their own essential essence and like creating wars, and all these people are dying, but it's all to create a life or a world with like no pain and suffering where everyone is happy.
Yeah, 1,000 years of compassion.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fascinating element of it, especially because the game, in terms that I very much like, puts this as sort of, it makes very clear that like this is still bad, because it removes the idea of like want and struggle and pursuit, which are sort of integral thematics throughout the Soulsborne series, but are also integral thematics to Soulsborne game design, right? Like you have to want and struggle. Like the act of playing these games is sort of an act of wanting and struggling and of difficulty.
And the use of a consort as well to get the ritual completed, it made me think of, my reliance on mimics or summons at times, because like I don't want to get the job done myself, and how that works in thematically, like just something that would otherwise be a mechanic ungrounded from anything other than gameplay.
Yeah, it's like it does. I guess to flush that little rant down into a single thing, it does feel like the game is a little metatextual in that sense, that it's sort of engaging with, I don't think it's responding to Soulsborne games should have an easy mode as an argument. I don't think it's really responding to that, but it is like making narrative the argument for why the games are the way that they are.
I think what it's done with like it's the multiplayer and the summons, but also the general like just wide array of choices you can make towards your character's like fashion and appearance, in addition to like magic and rollout, is like there's always been this metatextual like fashion souls thing going on in the community where like you on your new game plus 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 you're at this point where you can dress as anything, you can spec up like the game. I feel that kind of metatextual kind of like fan love is just made the text in Elden Ring. Like you get so many more opportunities to respec end the base game, plus the DLC like gives you even more larval tiers. That idea of like what you want your identity to be within this universe is just it's beyond like, hey, what do I want to share with the fans? But the game creators directly ask you.
Yeah, they give you an ability to flexibly engage with that, and they also how do I put they also I think that the Erdtree shards or whatever they're called are the shadow shards, whatever they're
Yeah,
called.
the things for powering up.
Yeah, I think those are a really fun addition also. Just in terms of like they give you a thing to track down, and they also make you scale just sort of like generally you just like get generally stronger, and it's sort of like, oh, look, you did it. Like it's a classic level up as opposed to the way the
Yeah,
level up in this game
I had a
work.
friend liken them to like heart containers in Zelda, like the
Yeah,
fragmented
totally.
heart containers that give you the general health boost. And yeah, and a lot of that feels like the general map design being more truncated in Zelda and Clockwork, and like regions unlocking upon regions, and suddenly you're underground and above ground, and it makes the whole thing clicky and chunky in a fun way.
Yeah, Henry's got some Pedro Pascal going on. RPG Slayer Lord. That is a good.
Why,
That is
thank
a
you.
good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's correct, and I think so. I think this game has a lot of ideas in it that I like because this is a game from a studio that consistently puts out games that have ideas that I like, and they did it again. Shocking development, I know. So, what? How do you feel about? I have my little list of things, uh, and I will go through them, and then we can talk about whatever stuff catches your thoughts. Um,
Sure.
so, so I mean, we already kind of talked about this. We just kind of wrap this up. They kept up, and I think the shards thing speaks to this too. They kept up like the fundamental like ludic style of these games, which I think is my favorite thing about them, which is that like you I mean, you can brute force them by just leveling endlessly and grinding a million runes and just like leveling up, leveling up, leveling up, and just giving yourself infinite vigor or whatever. But mostly the way these games work is that you, the player, have to get better at it along with your character as you go on. And I don't think this game is really any exception. It's just as much sort of learning new tricks, learning new approaches, finding new weapons, learning new weapon styles, approaching things creatively. And I think that's sort of, to me, the coolest thing about these games always is that they are player growth is so much more a component of it than character growth, or like relative to other games, I think.
Yeah, the character growth is the player growth is the character growth. You're like more active and present than like voyeuristic or like edging along another character. It's the way it's integrated in these games really is something special to me.
Yeah, I think I don't know. And like we said, I think that they do metatextually engage with that in the way that like the thing you're fighting for is like the ability to struggle.
I
Um
Yeah, I do think too. America and what we learn about America in the lore here just reinforces a lot of thematics about ascension and sacrifice and struggle. Uh, if there's time later to talk about that, if you want to keep going with,
we can skip ahead to my America stuff.
okay.
I have America theory or America characterology opinion.
When I first played Elden Ring, I didn't think America was real, or I think there's a valid read of the base game lore as to whether or not America is a real thing or an imagined thing pursued on the physical level. But this DLC put it to sleep in a way I really liked.
Yeah, I mean she's definitely real. My thing with America is now, uh, I thought this a little bit after the first game because of some item descriptions. We can get into the specifics we want to. Uh, that that you killing America and starting sort of a new cycle of whatever the new thing is was like what she wanted the whole time. And that her choices were largely to that end. And I think that this game, while the DLC doesn't like confirm that explicitly, I think it just lends a lot more credence to that position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so this kind of ties two of my thoughts together, but whatever. We'll just go wacko mode. So a big thing about these games, I think people don't talk about enough, except for the nerds who are that I like, is that they're like largely about aliens. That like the Greater Will, the Golden Order, the Fingers, the Frenzied Flame, other beings that pop up come from outer space and like land and like try to enforce their specific alien agenda or alien ideology onto the world and order it along these sort of lines of alien stuff. I think America doesn't like that. And I think America's choices all sort of speak to someone who uh, wants to be free to make choices in their own way, extricated from this sort of top-down imposed mechanism that is the Golden Order, that is the Greater Will. And I think that what she does in the game by breaking the Elden Ring sets that series of events into motion. Obviously, that's the plot of the game. I think in the DLC we like learn about, she was a shaman. All the shaman got killed by the Horn Scent. She started worked her way up through the Horn Scent to become powerful, and then betrayed them all. And she put all the Michaela stuff into place and left Mesmer there and put an orb in his eye so he wouldn't become a snake boy, which she does eventually anyways. And then we also learn that there's two things that really made me be like, oh, this game feels like evidence to my pre-existing theory, which obviously has like as a statement laden with uh, confirmation bias. But there's the first thing is that we learned that like the Fingers and the Golden Order were like fucked up from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, there's the
whole thing
Ymir, the
with
priest.
Meter, or yeah.
Yeah, Ymir the priest is like, if the roots are corrupted, then what hope is there to heal the branches or whatever? So there are a lot of really good memorable NPCs. I didn't like super remember any of their voices except for the one guy who's just always like, "Curse you, Bale!" I love that guy.
Egon. There's Horn Scent.
There's
Was it Lita or Lena? I can't remember if it's an N or a D in her name.
yeah, there's a couple of really good ones, but the point being that I'm just gonna do the same voice for all of them. But the Ymir sort of has that thing about how like the Golden Order and the Greater Will that imposes it and the Fingers are all sort of corrupt from the beginning and sort of don't actually have this grasp on the world. And I think so that makes me think America like understands that at a certain point. That America sort of is like this order that is being imposed in the world, in which I manifest as sort of its champion by virtue of being Elden, the queen, is bad. And whether she knows that before she becomes the queen or after she figures it out, she comes to that conclusion and then orchestrates the events that lead to the plot of the game Elden Ring that we all know and love.
I could buy that because, well, first off, America's ascent from the Shadowlands to the lands between, and her sacrifice of like hiding her son, giving up her past family. On like a thematic level, it speaks to me of her transcending from like person to idea or icon, like something capable of being a queen or a religious like universe binding symbol. On a play level, it echoes to me, the player leveling up and the player's sense of ascension and kind of, I don't know. I think it fits really well in that sense, both in like a new game plus and a first game run through, because it falls in a place that you discover right before, the fire giant. So it starts bringing up these questions of like actually deciding, do you want to do what America did? Do you want to sit on the throne? Do you want to burn it down? Do you want to go to the moon with your girlfriend? it makes so much of the base game lore that may be esoteric just very explicit with like this idea of choice and ascension.
Yeah, and I think that there's a line. I'm gonna get it wrong, but there's a line along the lines of like, what is a god but divinity caged or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
somebody says. And I think that's sort of the core idea is that America or any sort of ascended god loses freedom in their sort of distillation to a strict idea.
Mm-hmm.
I see a comment in the chat that I like that from Wanagando that the default ending is the Age of Fracture. You kill the Elden Beast, America doesn't come back to life. So there's a greater will of any connection lines between. It doesn't. Well, it doesn't naturally because it's an alien, but I think this is sort of proving my point, right? That the thing that America wants is to fracture that connection and fracture the greater will's hold on stuff. Because it obviously is influencing events in some way or another. The fingers are rooting into stuff and it is around. Yeah, exactly. So it's that her desire is to dislodge that thing by making herself free. And in doing so, kind of freeing the world from this influence and like sort of whatever comes next, whether it's your Rodney ending or your Age of Fracture or your Age of Flame or whatever. And I think that's like a very interesting component of like a thematic component to the series because I think so many of these games are about cycles and their inescapability and the cost of making the attempt to escape them and the danger of accepting them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Dark Souls 1, the sort of revelation is that it's all a cycle, and then Dark Souls 2, the revelation is like, and you can't escape.
Yeah,
So
the kind of guiding idea I've lensed it through is sort of like Buddhist. Well, they're kind of like Buddhist lensings of like Western myth or like these myths about like power or exceptionalism. And when you take that more Buddhist kind of recurrent cycle, sort of like what is this if we continue on this way, sort of framing of it. It's a fun hook.
yeah, well, I always think of we talked about this a lot in our Elden Ring video. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. Um, but we talked a lot about Mark Fisher's capitalist realism and the idea of the past infecting the present and
Hauntology.
yeah, hauntology and the slow erasure of the future and the sort of looping of patterns of behavior and cycles of social construction, social behavior on top of themselves and the recreations thereof. And I think these games have always had just like so much of that in it. And I think it's interesting that Elden Ring, at least if you take this America reading that I'm sort of putting out there, makes sort of the same argument that the end of the Dark Souls 3 DLC makes, which is that sort of like, yes, there's obviously a lot of ways breaking the cycle can go like extremely bad. Everything might catch on fire, which no one wants that really, except for psychos. But it's better that than to be stuck in this infinitely recursive pattern of suffering and death forever.
Yeah, at the end of everything, it's just kibble and ash and just layers upon layers of the same structures.
Right, because if you remember, there's that Dark Souls 3 DLC
Mm-hmm.
ending where everything's on fire, and then they take the blood and start to like paint an image
Mm-hmm.
that's like new and different. And that's I think sort of similar to this America idea of okay, what if we can destroy the order and then something will come afterwards, something new and different, whether that's better or worse or whatever, it's different. And difference is like the space for change, the possibility, the horizon of possibility for something otherwise, and that the game sort of maybe doesn't necessarily say that that's good. It certainly in no explicit terms is like this is what's happening in the rocks because they never will ever do that with anything. Does sort of feel like just from like a almost like screenwriting perspective, like you don't put this much time into like explaining Erica's deal and her motivations if that's not something you want players to dig into and think about. And I think it's in stark contrast to my next thing on the list, which is the Michaela deal, because I think Michaela is so fascinating. Because I think Michaela's curse is such a creative one and one that I've never seen in anything else.
Did you
Oh
see? So you saw the fight with him, right? With Consort Radon and all
yeah,
that.
no, I did that.
Did you see the two in a row hit with the
Oh, yeah,
special
like
kiss?
what
Yeah,
steals your heart. Yeah,
yeah. That's so great.
Yeah, well, I love that they know that's like it's such a nice touch and such a thing that a lot of video games don't do, which is like you'll have a villain or an antagonist, and they'll be like, "This antagonist has the special power of like ultimate stab," and then you fight them at the end of the game, and they like don't use their ultimate stab because it would be unfair for as like a play. And so I like that they found a way to include Michaela's heart stealing brainwash powers
He
in the
is a
fight, in
monster. Yeah.
yeah, in the fight in a way where you get to engage with it, and it doesn't just feel like sidelined like arbitrarily, as happens so often. But yeah, Michaela's curse is fascinating because Michaela's curse, right, is this curse of like nascency, and of like eternal youth, but also like eternal beginning.
Hmm.
And I like that idea a lot because it sort of positions Michaela as unable to finish anything. Like Michaela is always at the start of every process. Is always eternally young, eternally trying to become a god, but never fully succeeding. Eternally trying to stop a
Yeah,
conflict.
always kind of carried over the success line by like someone else.
Well, also never carried over the success line. I think is the thing, right? Is always in progress, always becoming, never.
Never completing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really fascinating. Oh, because again, all the ludic shit we talked about before, like you never are going to become perfect at Elden Ring. It can never be fully completed because there's always ways you can grow and change and get with it.
They give you 9 larval tiers in the DLC in case you really don't know what you want to do with yourself.
Yeah,
And
on top of
yeah,
20 something or whatever in the base game.
yeah,
Um, so there's this curse of nascency thing, and I think that goes really interestingly with the America theory, in that we sort of see this like, okay, there's this kind of childish iteration of what change and like salvation looks like, which is I'll just make everyone happy forever, and if they lose their free will over it, well, that's fine because they're happy, and I can use my Michaela powers to do it, and that's I love it's everyone will love me, and like that's one iteration of sort of change, and there's America's iteration, which is a much more adult iteration, which is like I will make these compromises, I will suffer these consequences, I will put myself in danger, I will arrange the assassination of my children, um, arguably, etc. Because there's this greater goal that I'm seeking, and it's one that has to be reached affirmatively. Like it can't just be that I brainwash everyone to be like greater will go away. Like I have to get
like
people to want to do
yeah,
that.
you have to express through like proficiency and dominance. It's like playing the game in the sense that you're accruing massive amounts of souls that then you're sacrificing to enhance your own power.
Yeah, I mean, true. I hadn't even thought about it in those terms. That's absolutely the case, huh?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's sort of the. I think I find that tension to be really fascinating and I find that to be a really interesting component of the game. That there's this juxtaposition between America's very sort of pragmatic, if crazy, like to be fair, bananas plan to create freedom. It's like so many steps. It's like first I'll become a god, then once I'm a god and sort of trapped by the divinity of the Golden Order, I'll you know hide the rune of death, but hide it with the intention that some of it will get stolen back by one of my crazy children, and then I'll organize
The kids will figure it out.
and then I'll organize a night of assassinations, which I think that she's behind the Night of Long Knives because there's that item, the long knife armor, the black knife armor rather has the description that like all the black knife assassins were like America's friends.
I
So
I was going to say I honestly haven't looked into that mystery. I think I was just like, okay, Ranny, whatever you say, babe.
yeah, fair enough. She's Randy's the best, but like I think there's uh there's one like there's a reading where it's like Randy did it, and the tragedy of it is that they were all America's best friends. I kind of think that I find it more compelling, and it makes more sense to me that it's like America asked them to do, and they did it because they were all her best friends.
Yeah, knowing that America is human, because I honestly didn't really give much thought to like what that shifts in regards to things other than like is Radon America kind of like final boss questions, but like it does make me think a bit more on that mystery than instead of just thinking Rani did it, because like if America's human and not like a vague abstract or higher animating will, like she has faults and frustrations.
Yeah, or just like ambitions and the capacity to see them through, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that I think is striking is that like she like then to their chronology like does the assassination thing, and in return for that shatters the Elden Ring, which sets into motion all of this conflict. The shattering, which is annoyingly a different thing than the act of shattering the Elden Ring, which is like some name, which is one of my only complaints. The plotting of this fucking thing is that like just call it something else, man. Either use a different verb for what you did or call the giant war something else, but you can't shatter the Elden Ring and have the shattering be a distinct event. That's infuriating to me. But like then that happens and that sets into motion sort of Michaela's plans, but also all of America's plans, and then the Tarnished arrive, and then they, she sends the Tarnished away to fight their war, and so they're not there when all the stuff goes down. They can come back, and one of them can finally do the thing and oust her and break the hold of the Greater Will, the Golden Order over everything, unless you do like the Golden Mask ending, I guess. Because there has to be an ending where you can like be a cop if you want, but that's for nerds. But yeah, so like I think there's this really interesting juxtaposition built into the game about the distance between sort of the dreamed hand waved outcome of change that is sort of Michaela's approach, that is bound up with this endless nascency and endlessly childlike approach, and the very adult and like suffering and experientially informed approach that America has. And I think the game puts them in tension with one another.
What do you think of like Mesmer's place as like a child of America wrought with just like suffering and angst?
Yeah, Mesmer is interesting to me. I like Mesmer the character. I think he's cool. I think the part where he just like busts up his own eyeball to release his inner snake is one of my favorite cinematics in any of Elden Ring. I think it looks so good, and I think it's such a cool moment. I think in this like chronological or cosmological framework that I'm talking about, I think he's sort of, you know, I I think America understands. This is like a very JRPG anime way to think about this, but whatever. It's just how I live my life. But America kind of understand, right? Because this is so the one problem with my America theory that friends of mine have talked about this point out is that like if she wanted someone to just like kill her, like why doesn't she just like let someone come to her house? Do you know what I mean? Like why is it so difficult? And I think that the answer to that is that I don't know if she's capable of just simply allowing herself to be killed. I think there's probably some like Golden Order instinctual stuff happening there that like prevents her from just like laying down taking it. And B, there's the Elden Beast,
Yeah,
right?
there has. I always figured it was kind of like, well, whatever destroys America has to be able to contain the Elden Beast.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Mesmer is just part of that process. Is that Mesmer is left behind because whoever's going to be able to stop Michaela has to be able to deal with Mesmer. Also, Mesmer is important for like her vengeance, like because America's human. She also has like a vengeance quest thing. Like she wants to hurt the Horn Scent very badly, and someone's got to do it, and she had to leave. Um, and she leaves Mesmer behind to do that, and she traps his snake inside so that he can do it with rationality or whatever. But I think ultimately her goal is to to find someone who's capable of doing these things. The only way to find out they're capable is to leave these obstacles in place. And that's the core essential thing that's happening here is that Mesmer is another one of those obstacles. Also, like a very tragic one because Mesmer is very sad to me. The character makes me very sad to think about because he's just like one of her kids, and she's just like, "Look, your job is to lead an always war forever until someone comes to kill you."
See, now I'm thinking in the context of like America relating to keeping the Elden Beast contained, and like, is it inevitable that like the Elden Ring has to be shattered so a new container can be found, or does she just like, or is the Beast kind of like forcing this? Like, I don't know. It's shifting the either or of like, did Radagon pursue America, or is America even real? To did America want, as you say, the whole thing shattered, or did someone else do the knives?
Yeah, I mean, and my take is it's America. I think a lot of this game points in that direction. Especially like because it's all alien stuff, right? It's all like I think America sort of is keyed into and understands that like none of the stuff that happens is sort of the natural processes of the lands between. That that I mean, insofar as there are any of those, it's like a weird fucked up spook city, but like that they're all sort of downstream from like giant space creatures crashing into the planet and being like, "We're in charge," even though they don't explicitly say that. But like, I mean, it's like Bloodborne, right? Like, there are these great ones that exist sort of within and beyond the world that sort of dictate the terms of everything happens. And I think that America wants to take that power away from them to some degree and return that power to things that are more like who she was when she was not a caged divinity. Um, and I think that in that respect, she sort of, I think, is willing to make all these sacrifices to that end. And I think again, I think this is accentuated by like when you meet Metis, the grossest boss in the world, or Meta rather. Metis is the one from Bloodborne. Meta, the grossest boss in the universe, the mother of fingers. I
Yeah,
think,
the creepy crawly finger scorpion.
yeah, I think that just reinforces this that like Meta is this just like horrible, twisted, abandonized monster, and that this is sort of what happens when you sort of are just this object of these greater forces,
Yeah,
and that the world's going to turn into a bunch of finger guys,
yeah.
basically.
Speaking of Meta and the finger guys and the way like the world contorts and distorts, the jar people, just seeing the process of people being
Oh
jammed
my
into jars and the weird sticky pink fleshy squishiness of it all. I, I I enjoyed seeing that process and then coming upon the shaman village and just kind of slowly it dawning on me like, oh, they did horrible things to these people, and it kind of instantly clicking with you once you realize you're in Marika's hometown.
Yeah, I mean, what is that item? The whip with the teeth on it
Yeah.
that has like the description that's just like they use this to keep all the shamans in line, but also to flay their skin off to put them in the jars.
You
Um,
gotta cram the people in the jars. But yeah, it brings to mind like contortion and like jamming and just thinking of Metter in the fingers and the constant finger and hand symbology throughout the whole base game and the DLC. Just what we contort ourselves into saying we have to do seems like a question that pops up throughout.
yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, all that stuff always reminds me of so like not Mark Fisher talks about in capitalist realism and some of his other work the idea of like stitching and remixing and uses stitching very specifically as a metaphor for modern sort of artistic and conceptual production that we're just like t- taking things and stitching them together to create new landscapes that aren't actually new, and like the stitching imagery is just so prevalent in all of Elden Ring and in Shadows of
Godric
the
the
Erdtree.
Grafted, yeah.
Yeah, but also like the finger guys have too many fingers. Meta is like a bunch of hands stitched together. The map, if you look at the map, all the regions are stitched together, like from pieces of map that are fragmented. And so I think there is, I mean, intentionally or not, a resonance there that speaks to kind of what you're talking about in terms of sort of the world contorting and the desire to like morph and control things, and it is just like taking the past, taking the material of the world, and restitching it and recontorting it into this new shape that is like in service of whatever ideological position. In this case, the Golden Order, but like it could be whatever.
Yeah, Dark Souls 3, like the final areas of that game are all just like again, just heaps of ash and buildings crumbling upon each other from like redundant structures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're all just it's all so Mark Fisher. Honestly, like if you take anything away from the stream, is go play Elden Ring and then read Capitalist Realism, and you'll learn so much. And then listen to the Arctic Monkeys. Uh, or I guess he would rather you listen to some jungle, but I like the Arctic Monkeys, even though he says that they're bad, or at least emblematic of a bad thing. But yeah, I think that's sort of. I think you're right though that the fingers themselves, like what fingers do, which is like mold, hold, poke, prod, like in life, is I think not not like a silly coinky dink. I think
Yeah.
it's very much grounded in the material of the game. Um, all right, we got a question. See, America is the Vendrick, someone gung ho about the trying to usurp the logic of the world, but eventually gets crestfallen with her own ideas. But lots of people don't see she made fixable mistakes. Um, yeah. See, like I said, I kind of go the other way. I think that she's happy. Like I don't. I think she's doing this on purpose and is happy with these outcomes. Um, but I think that you're right in that she is trying to usurp or derail the logic of the world. I think that she's not mad about how it plays out. I think she's like resigned to how it was going to play out.
I
But I think that's an open question. Like I think that's part of the like I don't know. This is like a different conversation for another time. But like I totally think I could be wrong about the specific like facticity of the song I'm talking about in terms of like what happened in the lore, like if they have like a document. But I think that characterologically, it speaks to uh, to America as a figure whose main goal is the liberation of the world from its ordering impulse. And like that's the thing that she wants. I think that's a fascinating approach to reading these characters. Because I always like, I do think that it's really hard in these games textually to read them and be like, this is what happened.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
did
I think that
read.
you can. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I did read a bit of a potential motivation in her just simply wanting to be liberated from Radagon. Um, because
That's interesting.
Yeah, because throughout the story, he's very much like a Charles Foster Kane. I think Radagon Seal describes him as like seeking to be all knowing but finding nothing. There's a few pieces of lore description that to me read is very like Charles Foster Kane or Daniel Plainview, in that like for all his warlording and stuff, he was an empty vessel, or he was always curious, never satisfied, and like that sort of void property, like you could assign like a mythological level of like power to, and that just being something too much of a drain on America, the ever loving seed of this order.
Yeah, I think that can make sense too. Uh, I think we are. Yeah, I think that's fair too. I think when it comes down to this like characterological assessment of her as like
Mm-hmm.
a person in pursuit of freedom from
Mm.
constraint, whether that's ideological constraint or the material constraint of Radigan or the logic of the world, like Stephen Lucas said. And I think that that's an interesting way to read the character. I think that it's like impossible a lot of times to say this is what happened in the lore, and I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times really interesting characterological conversations about FromSoft games get swallowed up by people being like, that's not what happened in the lore. And it's like, I don't, it's the question is like narratively and thematically what these characters interact and represent is so much more fascinating to me than like who can suss out which details from item descriptions. But I think that, to go back to Stephen Lucas' thing, I think it's a totally fair read on the character. And I think it speaks to the same kind of idea of freedom and just this question of how we relate to her experience thereof.
Yeah,
Um,
that's also why for a bit there I was like, is Marika real, or is she like a projected like perfect feminine that like Radagon was pursuing and kind of like projecting onto like a higher abstract?
yeah, I think that's totally right. Wow, Henry, they think you're youthful in the chat. And why are we here on a Tuesday? Because Henry and I wanted to talk about Elden Ring,
Yeah.
and this is the time that we're able to do it. But actually, that's a good segue because we're gonna have to wrap up pretty soon. But this is a good time to say that I think we're gonna do more of these Lux and Henry video game nerd stuff things on the Patreon. So if you're having fun watching this and you'd like more of it, I think we're going to make them available for people at the $1 level. So if you're watching and you're not a Patreon member, go to patreon.com/wisecrack and join for $1. And uh, then you can see more of this. We'll talk about other games. Honestly, we'll probably talk more about Elden Ring next time we do this, but who knows? But yeah, we're just gonna do more gaming stuff and create more gaming content in anticipation of future endeavors that we have planned. That I'll that's a tease, and there'll be more information about that to come. But yeah, so this is like a little trial run, a little free taste for y'all to enjoy. But we got 10 minutes left before we gotta go. So what else is there to talk about? What do you think about Saint Trina? I love Saint Trina.
Yeah, I love that whole side quest because I did not like Tholier at first. I was like, dude's selling me poison and just being generally weird. I don't like him. But then he started showing up to help me, and I was like, you know what? You're cool, Talier. Your lady sleeps with me, and we drink potions, and we're all having a fun time together. I love y'all. This is good DLC. This is good content.
Yeah, I was so taken with the idea of like the cultural and spatial value. See, also if you like the stream, you'll feel great. James Lawson reports. So like the stream, subscribe for $1. See more of me and Henry doing this. It'll be so awesome, and we'll get
Yeah.
better at it. Maybe we'll do stuff where we play games. You can watch us playing games and stuff. We haven't really planned that too much. And if you join the Patreon, you can get in the Discord and tell us what you'd like us to do because we're flexible. We don't have a locked in idea of what we're doing. Um,
How would you like us to spend our Tuesday?
yeah, exactly. You could choose that. You have that kind of power. It's a low spend for that level of authority. But I thought Saint Trina was so interesting because the idea of someone. At first, I was sort of like you, where I was like, okay, I guess this is like a symbolic love interest, and Thenia or whatever their name is annoying, and okay, like they're just sort of around and they're purple, and I guess that's nice. But then I thought more about the idea of like someone who can make it so you can sleep in a world where like basically everyone's either undead or alive in the midst of horrible suffering
Yeah.
and disease, and like everything's on fire all the time. And like
That is a piece of consideration I had forgotten since I had just come back to the DLC and like hadn't visited the base game in a while. Like, yeah, that's
it's like that seems like such an important person.
yeah.
Like,
As
and
part of Mikkela's kindness and love, or was it just love?
yeah, no, she was his love. Um, yeah, she was his love, and he cast her aside in his pursuit of magic or of power and stuff. Also pouring out for Moog, dude. Moog, those games really like when you
Yeah,
meet
allegations cleared.
yeah, when you meet Moog, it's like everything is like Moog is a fucking psycho
He's
pervert
the
who kidnaps
Dark
the
Lord, evil
who like
guy in the basement with children and eggs.
yeah, he loves blood and he kidnapped the infinite baby for his weird dungeon. And then it's like, oh
Potential
no,
sex pest?
yeah, but then it like turns out no, like he was brainwashed into doing literally everything, and then he got murdered so his corpse could be used for a ghost to live in. Um, and like that's rough. That's like a bad beat for Moog, and so good, good for him to sort of get his chance, his real.
I enjoyed just personally that whole storehouse with the specimens hanging in the air and just like the giant library aspects of it. It was a cool place to like show off just like, oh, someone's been in here collecting something. Like this isn't just like newly found land. There's been established like science going on.
Yeah, that
The whole Shadowkeep area, just like really,
Shadowkeep is
really
very
good.
sick. It did playing through the whole game, like learning the whole story of everyone, makes you want to do a run through again. That's like a extreme bleed and blood magic build, and be like Moog's revenge. Be like, actually, Moog was right the whole
Just
time.
yeah,
Like,
just justice for my lord the whole
yeah,
time.
blood rules. It's sick.
Hey,
And
everybody has blood. Blood's a good
yeah,
thing. I'm
yeah,
changing the rep.
yeah, exactly. We're taking blood back. Um, so I guess the big news of the stream, according to the chat, is Henry is that you have a human face. So congratulations to Henry.
That's good to know. I was a little
Um,
scared. I don't use mirrors a lot.
yeah, yeah. Henry can't appear in mirrors, only on camera because of vampire rules. But And we need not engage with the fact that cameras have mirrors in them. Um, if we
No,
have like
there's
5 minutes
mirrorless
left,
ones now. We're good.
that's true. That's true. Henry can only appear in mirrorless cameras. If you, we got like 5 minutes left, so we'll keep talking about this game because we talked about it for ages. But if you have questions about this game, get them in quick, chat, because we got to go soon because I have stuff to do.
Yeah, I have an edit to get back to as well on a thing we're doing.
Yeah, it's true, and I need to review that edit when it's finished. So if you have questions, we got 5 more minutes. Otherwise, what else is on my list of stuff?
Did you have feelings about the boss that's a bunch of phantoms, all the NPC summons in the arena, like the penultimate boss?
Oh, where it's like when Michaela's curse is broken and all of his like little friends like go crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Right before you fight Consort Radon, when you have to fight like whatever NPCs you ended up siding with throughout.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
because I mean, just it speaks to like to rewind to the earlier conversation about Michaela and nascency. Like it speaks to the sort of childlike element of Michaela's whole deal, where it's like Michaela's like, I can use my brainwashing powers to sort of get all these people who don't get along to be best friends in service of me, the love wizard. And then it's like, as soon as that's gone, it all falls apart. And like, in the same way that like, in contrast to America's like sort of goal of being like to motivate, to create the conditions for self-motivated action, Michaela's like, I took over your mind, do what I say. And as soon as that do what I say is gone, that the coalition doesn't make any sense anymore.
yeah. Michaela's shattering of his rune like just demotivates everyone, whereas like America shattering the Elden Ring like is the motivating factor of the game. Like every player who is participating in this universe, like that's the motivating factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
Hello,
Chris
Matt.
Maverick.
We're just wrapping up, but yeah, Henry and I are doing a teaser stream for our future Patreon streams about video games, which anyone can access by subscribing to the Wisecrack Patreon at the $1 level. Wow. Um, so we'll do these some number of Tuesdays. It's unclear how often because we haven't really planned it at all, but more than never. Maybe like once or twice a month. I don't know. We talked to Burns about it. But the all the details aside, we are talking about Elden Ring. We're talking about nascency. We're talking about motivated collective action, and we're talking about everyone taking motivated collective action to spend $1 on the Wisecrack Patreon to watch me and Henry talk about other video games. Maybe next time I'll make Henry sit down while I explain the plot of all 11 Trails games.
I mean, I need you to explain that to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we could do.
Yeah.
We'll also need someone to stand behind you with a gun to make sure you don't try to leave once we get to episode 5.
Can I just play the games? I have In the Sky installed on this machine right now.
That's 1 out of 11, baby. Let's go.
Okay.
I love this game so much. I'm so close to the end of the new one. I'm gonna try to beat it before we leave for Colorado. But yeah, so any last Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
I just think a lot of what we talked about today again shows that there's like a depth of like interpretation you can layer upon your action as player in the game. And in that sense, that's why like Elden Ring is the role playing game to me. A lot of people will get like over deterministic about mythology and like player agency and like what the game's trying to tell you to do. I just think it's really great that like they paid enough attention to detail to like everything in the game to where like whatever kibble your character picks up over the progress of the game, there's like going to be lore explanations and details, and that kind of allows the player to mold their own organic narrative in the present moment of the game more so than have the game feed it a story. So I don't know. I really appreciate that, and I think the DLC highlights how well From is at making games that do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, um, uh, I think that's sort of the main thing. Uh, I think that what's going to put this? Elden Ring is great. Part of why Elden Ring is great is that you can role. This is a good note to end on. You can role play it or as much or as little as you want.
Yes.
Like all of my builds and all of my characters have dumb little stories that I make up for them.
Yes.
That are like complicated and weird and characterized. Whether it's my upcoming blood guy who
Yeah.
loves Moog,
You can
or
even be like, I have a character whose helmet belongs to like Gorm the Conqueror, and I found it in the hills, and I love
yeah,
Gorm because, and it's like your total subjective interpretation of why you love that helmet, but like they give you enough Play-Doh to like do what you want with it.
yeah. I mean, my first character's whole thing was he wanted to be a wizard, but because I wasn't good at using magic, I ended up becoming a strength guy. And so the lore was just that like he wanted to be a wizard really bad, but he was too dumb. And just ended up doing something different. Um, and I think that there's a there's something really wonderful about that, and about the that sort of element of it, and that you also can. I have friends who just like don't care,
Right.
who are just like, I'm gonna make an optimized build or a build that I find fun to play, and I'm not gonna think for 1 second about my dude's background.
Somebody's like,
And
hey, I found a cool like Ashes of War thing. I'm going to be Sonic the Hedgehog now.
yeah, but they might not even be Sonic the Hedgehog. They might just be like, this thing's cool, and I'm Daryl or whatever, and I like doing it. And there's no real onus on you to do more or less role playing. And I think that's part of the real fun of it is you can have none of the characterological assessment, none of the lore stuff, none of the role playing, and it's still mechanically super fun. People love it. Or if you're not as into the mechanics, there's so much character lore, there's so much characterology and thematics, there's so much narrative happening that makes it worth doing it. And there's all kinds of ranges in between. And I think that's sort of a testament to how well designed and well constructed the games are. Speaking of well designed and well constructed, this stream wasn't necessarily that, but we were going to try to get better.
Yeah.
And so please check out our upcoming streams, the Wisecrack Patreon, support them, like this stream, comment about how much you like this stream, let everyone know how much fun this is, and we'll be back eventually with some updates. But everyone have a good day. We got to go back to work.
Yeah. Have a good Tuesday, y'all. I'll be back with Michael tomorrow.
Yeah, enjoy Wisecrack Live tomorrow, folks. Goodbye.